Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our guest, Jacob Cooper. I'm Melissa Minnich, author of High on Life, A Prescription for Bliss, and live event host for Humanity's Team, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to make conscious living pervasive worldwide by 2040. I'm coming to you live from Austin, Texas, and we're so excited today to have Jacob Cooper joining us. How are you, Jacob? Welcome.
Good morning. I'm doing great, depending on what part of the world people are in, but it's good to be a part of this program today.
Hmm. Yeah, and where are you joining us from today?
I'm on the East Coast. I'm in New York. I live right here in Long Island. I live not on the water. I'm not Jesus. I don't walk on the water, but next to the water, and I just love being by the water. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, we're so excited to have you joining us today. And I want to welcome Jacob Cooper's audience, the Scene Network, those streaming live through the Humanities Team Facebook page, the Humanities Team YouTube channel, and Stream Plus members that are here in the green room with us. Thanks for being members, and some of you that are on camera. Hello, welcome everyone. And because it is a live program, we will have time for questions and comments. So try to get your question in within the first 30 to 40 minutes of the program. Post it in the chat and we'll get it answered for you. So let me share more about Jacob. Our guest, Jacob Cooper, was just 3 years old when he had a near-death experience that forever changed the course of his life. He witnessed some incredible light colors and golden palaces. We're going to be diving deep into his NDE and and that experience. And he reminds us of what we do not need to die in order to experience our own heaven on earth today. Jacob is passionate about promoting healing. He is a best-selling author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. He is a near-death experiencer and a sought-after speaker on mental health, spirituality, and consciousness, offering elevating seminars and individualized services to help others find purpose and connect to their inner power. I'm so excited that I got to do this interview with you today, Jacob, because I myself have had two NDEs, one when I was 12 months old that I don't remember, and one at 5. So I love connecting with other NDEs, and I remembered I got to interview Eben Alexander, who wrote Proof of Heaven, um,
Sure.
before for one of my docuseries. So this is always a wonderful topic that I love. But you were super young; you were only 3, and you remember this. So
hmm
can you share about, like, first off, what happened? How did you end? What happened at the age of 3?
hmm
Just take us back to that moment and tell us more about your near-death experience.
Oh, sure. Well, it's always special to share this experience. The goal is for it to not to be held on to myself, but for others, to see just the reflection of the story in their own memories of who they are. Yes, September of 1993, at this time, I didn't know it, nor did my family know it, but I had a condition called pertussis, otherwise known as whooping cough, which for infants, children, even adults, could lead to bodily death. I don't believe in death, obviously, but I obviously can't deny that the body, has an expiration date. I went to a playground at this time with family friends. I climbed up on a ladder going into a slide, and I just completely suffocated due to this cough. And as if every part of my body was just beginning to shut down, as really the breath keeps us physically alive, and we don't have that. It's unless you're on a ventilator or some type of life support, and as we saw in the COVID era, even then, that's a dicey situation. But I, at this time, just saw my body just completely deprived of oxygen. And the last thing that I felt was my brain, and I just was able to be aware of my body, my brain, and all its parts and functionality without spending a day in medical school. I was just 3 years old, but it just shows you there's a higher mind that we have that has awareness of all things. And there's a very limited slice of ourselves that sometimes forgets these things, but they're there. In this moment, I just literally felt my brain snapping in half, and I felt this loud crack within my brain. And once my brain cracked open, as a proverbial saying, that's when really the spirit realm and God came in, and we'll get to a little bit about the brain and the mind dichotomy because that's fascinating. But for the narrative of the NDE, I really was able to get far beyond my body. I accelerated to this infinite place of euphoria, familiarity, bliss. There was no time, at all. And I was able to really be united with my soul pod. I was able to be aware of my own spirit guides or guardian angels, that some would say, my primary spirit guides. I was aware of God. I had a degree of Christ consciousness. I was able to really become aware of previous lives and who I am and why I'm here, as well as future premonitions, which really was the biggest driving force for me to say yes to continue this life as a 3-year-old Jacob.
Mm,
Most NDErs are, I would say, around 75% are told that it's not your time. There's more karmic depth to kind of do, or just roles to play out. But I was, I wasn't one of those for whatever reason, and I was given autonomy, but I really saw that service, and giving over this experience to others was even more glorified and beautiful than heaven was to me.
mm,
And that's why I said yes and stayed. And the rest is kind of history. But with that decision, I just was filled with a lot of doubt in myself. Like, my God, what did I just do? I can't believe I just turned this down. And, my guides just gave me a very clear message where there's a beautiful intelligence that we all are created from. And it's very significant to trust in that intelligence over our fears and our doubts, and how we could really be in alignment through our faith and our connectivity and walk the path we were meant to walk that was guided before we got here. And with that understanding, I woke up in a hospital bed and had to really make sense of this big transformative experience that took me, around 2 decades to fully integrate into the body.
mhm. Wow. Yeah. I believe that, when we come in as children, and you are only 3 years old, that we're closest to spirit right when we come in and right when we die, right? Like those are the two moments
Hmm.
where we can embody. But as we grow, and our programming from our lives like puts these veils on us that takes us away from the remembrance of who we are. And so at the age of 3, you were able to and like integrate and remember and come back to that source of who
Hmm.
you were, which you were already attached to, which I think is sounds like one of the reasons why you had that choice. I also had a choice, and then I regretted that choice later in life and tried to commit suicide.
Hmm.
But I was like, I also had a choice because I knew that I was meant to be here to do some work in this world. And I love that you said I had a choice. I didn't have karmic debt. I didn't have
Hmm.
something, but I had a choice.
Hmm.
So what was the truth or the knowing that stayed with you after this return? Like when you came back and you said I had this choice and then I chose to come back. What was like the even though it took you said almost 2 decades to
Hmm.
integrate, what was the biggest thing for you right away that you started to notice in your life, or that was that stayed with you?
Yeah, it was an interesting trajectory that I had, because obviously, what our kids prescribed is to fit in and to be normal. And there's a big degree of disempowerment because I'm physically small, so too, I don't know anything. And people look at, oh, there's incongruence with the body, as if it's a new
Mhm.
body, then it's a brand new being that has nothing there. And so there's a great deal of disempowerment. After this experience, there were certainly a lot of after effects that were carried over. Certainly, intuition, premonitions, and interdimensional communication was a partnership of my life, but not something that I really embraced. I looked at it more as a burden than anything,
Mhm.
because what does a kid want to do is just to be normal and to fit in. And I
Mhm.
saw very early on that this was not understood by peers and people around me. And there was a great deal of alienation, that came with this. And so I kept it very quiet. I really didn't tell a soul up until, probably around almost 2 decades after my experience. I would say my later teens, early 20s was when I first, started talking a bit about it. There were certain powerful events that happened, but the event that I point most look back on was, one day I was just kind of acting out in my later teens, and my parents said, all right, you know what? you're gonna stay with someone else for a bit of time, and at the time probably deserved it. But I just walked around the corner of my house and I was just sobbing, and I saw a playground right in front of me. And in that moment, when I felt a sense of homelessness, where there wasn't a home that I felt connected to, and I felt incredibly displaced. Once again, the playground was that allegorical symbology of my near-death experience, how I was just a child in a playground, and how we are all children in the eternal playground of God. And that is
Mhm.
really the home that we have. And this is a temporary dwelling place. And in that moment, and a day later, I was sitting, in this yoga seminar, and this woman came up to me and she says, I felt that, a very low at my time. I didn't have much belief in myself. And this woman came up to me and said, "Wow, you're going to make a mark in this world. I see a lot of people in front of you, and I see you speaking in front of a lot of people." And I knew I had this in my near-death experience. I knew I had this, but I doubted it so much. I just said so many bad things have happened to me. I, at the time, was in non-accredited college courses. I was just not seeing much of a future. But this Earth Angel reminded me of who I really was. And with that, that sense of belief really influenced a lot of the behaviors that I was able to lean into that changed the trajectory of my life. But again,
Mhm.
beliefs are so pivotal in how we lead our lives. Yeah.
Wow, what a beautiful experience. And for sure, thank you for sharing that. Before we go on, we're going to share this clip from Module 2 of The Other Side and Back on the Humanity Stream, my NDE.
Jesus himself said that the kingdom of heaven in him is in you too. And so while I might be describing a place that for some, on some level, may be foreign, but for others, it will be quite familiar. But it is my honest belief that many people are tuning into spirituality and the understanding of the other side, because there is something quite familiar about what we're talking about. And I think a lot of people are remembering their own eternity and their own home. And it's my hope that my illustration of my near-death experience, the other side and back, lessons from my near-death experience, are just illustrations that allow you to remember who you are, why you're here in the infinite journey that we're all a part of. So join me on these 7 different modules and illustrations that I will be providing throughout the course of this discussion. And I hope you get something from this and it helps you on your journey. And my hope is you could share that with those that may be interested. And once you remember who we are not just creating heaven on earth, but we remember that we are all here, a part of heaven here on this earth. Therefore, we don't have to wait to experience heaven when we die, but rather we could experience that realization and that embodiment right here, right now, in these moments of our lives, in this pivotal juncture on all of our journeys and humanities. So walk with me. I'll take you to a powerful place that you all, at some level, remember, and it's my hope that you walk out of it with some jewels and wisdom and powerful tools that you can incorporate to enhance your everyday journeys and walk in the physical as eternal spiritual beings. Thank you, and let's start with the modules to come.
Beautiful. One of the things that you share in there that you say is there are a lot of us remembering eternity and their home. Why do you think that's happening right now?
That's a good question. I think pain in many ways could be a great opportunity for people to reevaluate their lives. And when people are going through degrees of suffering, um, as really Albert Camus says, within the dead of the winter, people are finding an infinite summer, and there it is good.
Mm.
And I think really right now there's a lot of suffering that people are encountering and just things that really do not resonate with truths within. And more people are finally starting to tune that voice when for so long we were told to just run away from that voice or that that voice is in someone else's hands or some other person with a VIP pass to truth. Um, and I think that really is bringing people closer in to remembering this. Um, but that's certainly a part of it. And the vulnerability that people have, to be able to reevaluate their lives, their views, is a big part of growth. I also think the information age that we're in, where now there's more accessibility, thanks to programs like yours, that are given more licensure and societal, more of approval and less stigmatization on people searching different pathways for truth versus the conventional forms of it are all big contributing factors, to the shift that we're seeing.
Beautiful. I agree with you when you say that we are here with heaven on earth. I
Mhm.
have a whole thing around my true belief and what that really means. And I
Wow.
see we're part of the greatest show in the galaxy right now, right? With what's happening in our world, and everybody's paying attention, and all of the souls are trying to come down here at this time and get here. And one of the things that you spoke about during your NDE was that and I hear this a lot from people that I've spoken to about NDEs, is they feel this like over encompassing feeling of like love, right? And you also said that you felt like you saw golden palaces and angelic beings and this radiant light. So now, after all of these years and being able to integrate some of this information, how do you interpret these symbols or what you experienced? Were they metaphors, reality, something else entirely?
Yeah, I can't really say that I could point to something and say that's God, because that would mean that God is a finite thing. The only
Mm,
thing I could point to and say that that's God is love, because love is the only infinite thing. Structures, symbols, those are just kind of ways for people to understand representations of things. And I think that's kind of what I had. But how can it be that I saw one thing represented as God and maybe another near-death experiencer saw something totally else? Is that not God, what they saw, and mine disqualified? I think they're all a part of it.
mm,
You're talking about the infinite source. So to me, it was just a representation that spoke on my soul level that I would understand. But it goes beyond that. But I always say, if it ain't love, it ain't God. So that is the only word that I could accurately pinpoint to describe, God as. And it's not something foreign. It's not something thousand miles away. It could feel that way, but it's right here in all of us, in each and every one of us. And certainly that's really what I remembered in my near-death experience, that we all
mm,
have connections to the divine. We all have a vine of the divine, as I say.
yeah. So, how did this experience shape your trajectory of your life's work? You're a healer, you're an author, you're a guide, you work
Mhm.
in mental health and both addiction and recovery.
Mhm.
What's the lineage of that?
A lot, I mean, at least for myself, you know, I I recognize that my life became a lot more meaningful when I was able to be in the service of others. As I mentioned before, having this experience in a playground reminded me how we are all a part of humanity's team, right? As children of God in the eternal playground of God. And so what does that mean? To be a brother and sister's keeper, to really be out there for others, to really not shy away from difficult situations of people's lives, but to rather to roll up your sleeves and to be there of support. And so for myself, I really take an eclectic approach to supporting others on their journey and to empowering them to really find solutions. And so I feel incredibly honored to be working in a multitude of fashions that could really cast a broad net for people to really navigate and enhance their journeys. Because I just, don't see this as something that we're here to just pay the bills and, retire and to get our 401ks or whatever. That's a part of it. But the other part I knew undoubtedly was that we were souls, and this life is a spiritual journey. And there's so much more intelligence that goes beyond our own understanding that is a part of us on this journey. And so to be there to elevate others is what it is all about to me. That really is. And, seeing the angels, seeing the guides, you could easily put them on pedestals and say, wow, they're guides and I'm just human. But I think really this Earth school is an opportunity for us to become more evolved and closer, to those things that we see outside of ourselves, to remember
Mm,
we have those same seeds in ourselves too.
mm. So you speak of the angels and our guides, and I want to
Right.
dive deeper into that. First, let's watch this part from Module 4 on angels and spirit guides, and we're going to dive into that.
Many people are to understand how much love and beauty is around themselves, they would never feel alone. And so each person, I want you to understand from my own firsthand experience, we all have guides that we are born into before this lifetime. And these guides are a part of the blueprint of our life. So the charting phase, before we get here, in other words, there's a strategy, there is a plan. I learned in my near-death experience the big illusion that this life is random, that we just get here from the womb and just are here to pay the bills and live a material life. Nuh-uh, that is not true. And my near-death experience told me that this is very much a life that we're here for spiritual reasons. We are at our core all spiritual beings. And so there's an intelligence, there's a grace, there's a purpose with everything that we're going through. Things are not just random, and we're not here living in silos with no one listening or watching us just in this physical body. And so there are so many souls and so much love from our spirit guides who are invested in every step of this journey. This is a collective journey. And I think if we're able to surrender to that, that would be very helpful. And I think it's important for viewers to understand, and listeners rather, to understand, is that you don't have to go far. Plenty of times people will maybe feel that gentle tap of the shoulder, or when they're in a crisis, they'll have that nudge to call upon their guardian angels, or maybe that voice tells you to just move that different direction and something happens. But it's important to really be tuned in to the forces at hand from our guides, from our angels around us, and from our loved ones. And if we're able to do that, while they won't give us all the answers, we really have to figure this out. It would be like taking a test and giving all the answers beforehand. They're here to guide us, to nurture us, to help us. They are here for our soul.
Oh, beautiful. So the angels and your spirit guides, what have they taught you about life and love and your soul's purpose?
A lot, certainly when I saw them, my near-death experience, I saw just incredible beauty surrounded by me. It was a male and female guide that I had, and I just was awakened with this feeling like, oh my Lord, I can't believe I forgot that you are with me at each step of this journey, that I had my blinders on, that I didn't really fully remember that you were here with me this whole time. I thought I was just this body and just myself and no one watching, but not true. They were with me. And when I saw them, I looked at them with just such awe. I just couldn't believe how beautiful they were and angelic they were. And I just like thought to myself, like, oh my God, like, why are you invested in me? Like, who am I? But that's not the
Mm,
way that they see ourselves. We judge. Spirit looks at us in a much different way than how we perceive ourselves. And so they see us with the same degree of beauty that we see in them. They see us for who we really are. And, sometimes we walk around in life with this box. We call that the ego, where we just have, I'm this, but I'm not that. And I'm this age, I'm this gender, I'm this culture, I'm this religion, I'm this job. And all these facets that are part of our human story that are true. And also, there's a much bigger part of ourselves that is also true as well, that goes beyond our human story. And so, spirit really sees us for our totality of our being and not the small sense of self that we oftentimes carry, on this journey, if that makes sense. So they see the
mm,
whole book and not just the page that we look on.
yeah. Beautiful. So I'm sure there's several people out there that are wondering, well, how do I, if I'm not going to have an NDE, how
Sure.
do I tune into my angels and my guides? Do you have specific techniques that you use? Like, what would you suggest for someone that's like, I want to be
Mhm.
able to work with my guides and my angels, but I don't know how to start doing that?
That's a great question, Melissa. I think the first thing is to remember that this is something that you can do. It's not just strictly some, person that we worship or idolize or just see the world. I think a part of it is recognizing we all have that equal connection. There's enough abundance of the pie to go around. And we all have that connection. I think the first thing is to get clear and to ask and say, show me you're here. Like, give me a sign. Talk to me. Be very specific with your intentions, with your questions.
Mm,
They know your thoughts, but again, it's part of a relationship where there's a halfway point, right? They're not just going to totally give it to you because part of the growth is being able to extend yourself, to believe, and to be vulnerable to what they tell you. Sometimes the guides will tell you to do things that you might perceive as crazy, but you do them, you're like, oh my God, that was a beautiful suggestion. Like I couldn't have ever thought of that myself. But again, because they perceive reality in much different ways. So I think the first thing is just starting with the communication. Some people may like to gravitate to automatic writing. Some might to verbalize it. Ask for evidence, ask for clarity. And what the guides are permitted to do that's helpful for you on your journey, that's empowering on your journey, they will be able to give it. So ask and you shall receive. I firmly have experienced in my life.
yeah.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with that. Sometimes the messages will seem like they are crazy. I remember I was asked to walk away from a seven-figure business. And I,
Mm,
oh no. And then when I didn't, the universe, God, source, decided to bring things into my life to force me out of that to move on. And then I was told to open a mystery school. And I was like, no, 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 I'm not going to do that. And then it was like, right, like these things that come in and I'm like, but now I've learned surrender, like it is beyond my, like to get my ego out of the way and listen to my higher self and my guides and that experience of like when these messages come through and you may not see the path in front of you, but if you allow for that, you're literally co-creating this experience and it becomes something beyond. Like I couldn't have imagined when I walked away from my business what would happen. And it was I was helping lots of people doing
mm,
really cool stuff. And so what do you say to someone that is maybe receiving messages that are resistant to it and aren't willing or not ready yet to surrender to that, and how does surrender play a role in this, and like how can they trust and have faith?
hmm It's a good question. I think practice, practice with, maybe it's not something quantum that you do, but maybe if you feel this inkling of a small step to take, that's a good exposure. As I'm working in the mental health field, I certainly believe that steps for some people could be very important. Avoidance only exacerbates things, as we know, whether that be anxiety or depression. When you avoid what's going on, it tends to feel good in the moment, but then it amplifies. So I would say, the guides know how we work and how we could be stretched. So I think it's for each person to understand some of the stretches that the guides are asking, or just putting out there for us to decide what to do with the information that they give and the downloads that we receive. So I think taking steps and just kind of seeing, where these steps lead you, or just kind of like the inkling message that we get from a guide about a person or something like that, and just having an innocent thought that you put out there. So I think it's in steps, in trial and error, that builds momentum, that builds confidence to take on some of those more quantum steps, that we feel that we are being shown maybe that we don't have the readiness to go about. So I think I'm a big believer in steps, hence the book, my second book, The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Hello, so
Yeah.
plus my Taurus side. Well, if you believe in astrology, we're very, I see myself as a earth sign who's very practical and grounded as well too. So I do believe in strategic approaches at times, but at times to get to the fruit and the tree and the limb, to get to the fruit in the tree, you have to go out on a limb, as Shirley MacLaine says, my birthday
Mm.
twin. So you have to take chances in life. That's very important to really grow as well.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, I'm really curious because you work in mental health and yet you do past life regression therapy. You've wrote these books, you've seen angels, you've had the NDE. And as someone who was diagnosed bipolar in my 20s and on every medication that could have existed and was
Hmm.
definitely very mentally ill and had to heal a lot of things, what do you think or feel in this earth school that we're in right now? What is mental illness showing us? The trauma, because I had chronic PTSD.
Hmm.
What do you believe on that our soul path is here with mental health issues and addiction and recovery? What is that showing us about what's happening on a soul level for us?
Yeah, it's a really valid question. I mean, certainly working the field as a social worker, I don't see mental health as strictly genetic or epigenetic. I also see a lot of collective social happenings that, can affect, our status. So a lot of things going on a macro level affecting us.
Mm,
But from a soul level, which people really don't look at mental health from because it's, deeply pathologized. And I really feel the solution is a solution in many ways. And I think that is a big missing piece of what I try to do within the work that I do. Not every client is ready or believes that. But I think from a soul level, as you mentioned, certain conditions I think are a part, of our soul's path and our charting phase. And you may just say, like, what was I thinking? This is just so painful to go through these traumas and all the anxieties I experienced today. Why would I sign up for this? And I
mm,
think in a way, pain is a great contributing factor, oftentimes to empathy as well as a sense of purpose. And when you're going through what you're going through, it allows you to be able to relate to someone, as you're going on your path in a different way that you would have no idea how to do had you not gone through these things. So this is an experience of the soul. This is an earth
mm,
experience. And so
mm,
it doesn't have to be painful. It doesn't have to be morose. And I think by tapping into our own spirit, we could really engage with pain, with suffering in a whole new vantage
mm,
point, because that really allows us to lean into more the victor versus victim, roles, and allows us to really feel into what's happening, not to me, but for me. And we're
mm,
able to look at things. So it's all about perspective in many ways, but when we're able to really trust that this is not a random existence, then we're able to see the purpose at a certain point behind all things in our life. If not that, we at least trust that there is, something going on beyond maybe our lack of understanding in the moment.
mm. Yeah. I know for myself, the trauma, the PTSD, all of those things led me to the mental illness that I had in my early 20s was what led me to the reason why I am here. I'm grateful for that because I now do the work that I do in the world. And I feel that that's very much, why are we here and what are we doing
Hmm.
to use these experiences together? So before we move on, let's go to the next clip, module number 5. Why am I here?
The better you are, the better we are. And so I think the more that people are able to evolve and understand, past life tendencies and grow from those experiences, the more evolved beings that they can be. And so I'll take an example of my near-death experience. For myself, for my soul, there was a connection of my near-death experience in my past life. Here I was having this experience completely suffocated, and there was nothing to hold on to. It was as if I was drowning or suffocating and not a log or anything to hold on to. And that was a similar sensation to what I had in which I completed suicide. I want to preface that those who do complete suicide are not judged or condemned. I could speak for myself, from my own experience, that we're given just further opportunities within each lifetime to evolve, to learn, to remember. And one of those lessons that I've learned is the value of understanding that if we lose all sorts of connectivity to our own breath, to our own, and this could be metaphorical or physical, that there's value in the art of letting go and surrendering. And certainly working as a therapist in the fields of addiction of recovery, I could tell you how valuable it is to surrender to something greater than our own pain. And I think that's very important for us to understand. And so when you are going through pain or suffering, it's important to allow yourself to trust that point to go through it. Einstein would famously say, is the universe a loving place, an ambivalent place or a place that is working with you? And so no matter what you're going through, even if it is at the surface, you could allow yourself to trust that the storms of today could lead to the rainbows of tomorrow, that we could allow ourselves to go through some of that turmoil. And there's a reason for it. It's not random. It will be guided to calmer shores, calmer seas within time. And so for us, why we're here is really to love, to remember who we are, to evolve, to grow, from other gifts that we've, garnered throughout life, different lifetimes, and most importantly, making this world a better place. My grandfather, who I visit his tombstone time to time, on it says he left the world a better place. And so when people ask me, you know, uh, why am I here? I think it's really to be undeniable proof that from our existences, the world is a better place. And we have no idea what value what we have, is until we really cross over. So we have no idea what that is. And you don't have to be, someone speaking in front of thousands of people to have an impact. It just has to be just a gentle smile on your face, being there to listen to other people, being supportive, being someone who's, a guide here on this planet who understands the we consciousness, who understands that others' growth is a part of our growth. And we're here just to support others while at the same time making sure that we are part of the equation, as we can't pour from an empty cup.
There's so much to unpack from that amazing clip from your program on the streaming platform. The first thing that I want to dive into is this connection between your past life and your NDE, because find that to be super fascinating. Could you share a little bit more about how the feeling of that when in you remembering your past life with this suicide and then the same experience of feeling those similar things in this life's NDE, was that a healing for that past life? Like having this experience in this life, do you think that was in a way healing it, or what was the deeper connection for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the universe or God is one big exposure therapy. It was a very, and now it's kind of karma doing this work as a therapist with other clients, but seeing it firsthand, the value. I really feel it was the same exact feeling that I had, where, it's just like you feel like the walls are caving, everything's against you, life
Mm,
is not working with you, and you just feel depleted of all of life force. And I felt that in every possible way. And
mm,
I do believe from completion we begin, and that's how we're able to evolve some of those decisions and points and references. But I think this near-death experience was an opportunity to remember who I was, to really be able to speak to what people go through and have spirituality, and consciousness and awareness of the bigger vantage points at hand, to really shed light on some things that they may be going through. Uh,
mm,
and so, yeah, when people are suffering, they just fight suffering with more negativity, and that doesn't really solve it. And so I think the vantage point that we have has to be a little bit different than the place of pain that we're, currently at.
mm,
And so for a lot of people, they feel suffering is just giving up. But I really learn through professional and personal experience that suffering is really given in to the power that is always around us. It allows us to move through, what we're going through with a lot more intelligence, support, love, grace, and
mm,
ease for sure.
mm. Yeah, suffering is going through. I like that. So you work with past life regression therapy, and then you're
Mhm.
also a social worker and work in the mental health field. First off, for those that might not know what past life regression therapy is, let's first explain that, and then I'd love to know how do you see this bridge between these two things coming together?
Yeah, I mean they partner very well, first of all. But to backtrack, for those who aren't familiar with past life regression therapy, it certainly it's a form of hypnosis that allows people to really tap into their higher mind. Some would call that the superconscious, the higher conscious, the higher self. But it allows people to really tap into memories that go beyond the conscious mind, that transcend not only this lifetime, but go beyond this lifetime. And with people going through past life regression, there's a multitude of avenues that lead people to it. But the most important thing is to that is what you come out of it. Like, how does it change you? How does it affect you? So you know something great, what do you do with it? And I found that a lot of my clients have been able to really shift their lives and shift maybe a point that they're stuck at. At the very least, there's a great relief that they have that like, wow, I had a body in another lifetime, that body went, and here I am, and I go on. So it gives firsthand evidential understanding of our eternity. And so a lot of people want near-death experiences, and I say you don't need to have one. You could really just tune in, meditate, or do a regression therapy, and that allows you to really tune into a part of you that has a knowing, that firsthand that you are more than this body and you go on. Now, regarding the conventional therapy work that I do in the mental health arena to passive regression, they work hand in hand because I think many times clients will come in and they've tried every modality, that Western medicine, psychology, or therapy has to offer, and they're still hitting a wall. And so passive regression is a possible avenue for breakthroughs that goes beyond just straight traditional talk therapy. And it could
Mhm.
even be physical. There are people who have, I've heard people who like needed like cataract surgeries and their eyes weren't working, let's just say, or they were visually impaired, and they went and they had a regression. All of a sudden, they saw, oh my God, I was burning the eyes in another lifetime. And that's the cellular memory that I'm holding on to in this lifetime that's repeating itself. And from
Mhm.
that past life, I'm able to have a boundary where that was then, that trauma that happened then, but it's not happening now. And so the same work that we have in trauma work in this life, past life could be the same way, where it stretches out and we're able to really retrain and rewire the brain to have different pathways to provide safety, to trust that what happened in the past is not re-experiencing itself in this moment, in
Mhm.
this lifetime, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so for what if for someone that's like maybe, oh, I don't believe in past lives or other lives, would this kind of therapy still work for them?
It sounds like the quote by Woody Allen. This is, I don't believe in past lives in my last lifetime, and I don't believe them in this lifetime. But no, it was yeah, yeah, but I would say is it's important for everyone to just I think skepticism is very important. I think there's a big dichotomy of skepticism versus cynicism.
Mm,
Cynicism leaves no room. Skepticism is a very healthy, vantage point because there could be a lot of stuff that's thrown out there that maybe isn't evidential, that maybe isn't, valid. And I think it's important to really have a dichotomy between religion and spirituality. Religion has at times blind faith. Spirituality is more firsthand evidential, basis that makes sense from each person. So I think it's important to really have a court case for each person. Like we're trying to build evidence that this is real. What I would say is you don't have to have a regression to do this. There's certain, avenues that could go that really work with your left brain that will have a very hard time debunking this stuff and certainly look at a lot of different case studies. Particularly, I know the University of Virginia has a perceptual studies department that has a lot of different archive case studies of different past life memories and evidential past life
mm,
experiences where people were able to remember their address, their families, and they even reunited with their families from other lifetimes where they were reincarnated and they were connected. So it's mind-boggling, but I think it honestly has to be something that each person recognizes, individual to individual.
I love it. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, obviously I'm a believer, but there's always skeptics out there and I appreciate
Yeah.
them. I was a skeptic for sure when I first started receiving messages and channeling things. I was like, I don't believe in that.
Hmm.
And then you have to open your viewpoint of how the world is. Okay, so let's dive into your books. You have two books, Life After Breath and The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. Let's start with your first book, Life After Breath. It's touched thousands. What inspires you to write it, and what message do you hope that readers walk away with?
It's a really good question. For myself, I wrote it kind of like right in the heat of the COVID pandemic, where I felt at this time, the world was going through this kind of global near-death experience where there was this world that we had that was just kind of yanked from us, and we were just put in this limbo phase. And COVID representing the respiratory, and and stuff like that. And I saw a lot of parallels with my own suffocation that I had and my near-death experience, and how that spoke to years later the current times where people are feeling literally, metaphorically out of breath. And so
Mm,
my near-death experience told me that yes, we have a physical breath, and at times, literally, metaphorically, that could be taken, but there's this breath of eternity that we could all surrender to. And that really allowed me to transcend my own physical suffocation, to remember this breath that we all had. And so I recognize this experience wasn't for my own taking, but for the giving to others. It wasn't really so much about me. It's as Pablo Picasso says, the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of it is to give it away. And there came a point in time where I just said, you know what? This it's time right now to let this go. This isn't supposed to be held on to. And that's when I really decided to write this book, because I think a book is something tangible that people could have,
mhm,
and hold on to and reference. And it's certainly something that changed my life. I would walk into libraries and feel very down and go into sections and check out Neil's books and other people, and that just would change my whole day. And I said, why does it have to be up that someone else who does that? Why can't it be myself? And so, that inspired me to write it, but I felt a big degree of guidance, from the universe to get this out there. And it's just something that came, from the guides from the universe, and it was timing. And it's also a homage to Dr. Raymond Moody. He wrote the book Life After Life. So
mm,
Life After Breath is kind of like a homage to his book. And he's a dear friend and someone that, really I would not be here today sitting and talking about these things without the work that he did and the daring work that he did in his given profession in his given time.
oh, beautiful. And so then the second book, and so you say your first one came out in 2020. So you've written two books in 5 years?
I guess so. Yeah, it was like two books in
Wow.
around the span of 3 years, three or
Yeah,
4 years. But as you know, when you write books, there's layover periods of editing and publishers and all that stuff. But
I
yeah,
know.
they came out consecutively. But yeah, Life After Breath is more the karma, more of the story of my near-death experience, and how I was able to process it. And The Wisdom, Jacob's Ladder, my second book, is more of the Dharma. What is the
Mm,
meaning? What's the essence of the story? And so uh those are I call them my karma, my dharma. That's really my own
mhm.
personal reference to them.
And so what deeper mysteries or revelations are in the second book that maybe weren't in that first book that you explore in that second book?
Yeah, the second book, kind of works like rungs on a ladder. And so, if you're familiar with Jacob, he had an experience where he was running from his life from his brother Esau due to the covenant, back in Genesis. And Jacob saw angels sleeping up and down the la angels going up and down the ladder when he was fleeing for his life, when death was come before him. And then he transcended that, and all those other things. So a ladder, when you think of a ladder, you think of different rungs, different steps from the earth to the heavens. And I think all of our lives are different ladders ascending,
Mm,
and we're evolving. And based on the information that we have, that's how we're able to really have, a different vantage point. And I always say the higher you go, the more you can see. And so having a near-death experience that I had, it was great, but what were the lessons? And so this book is really predicated on those different rungs in the ladder, different elements that deal with mental health. I speak to that. I speak to grief as well from a near-death experience perspective. I speak of, certainly suffering, past lives, and all different forms of different avenues of lessons that I've had. So
mm,
yeah, a lot of people are waiting for things to happen, not recognizing that in the here now we could have an awakening, we could have a quickening, we could have a shift based on information. So that's really, um, the work that the second book is predicated on.
beautiful. All right, so we have just about 10 minutes left. So if you have a question for Jacob, now is the time. Put it into the chat and we can ask Jacob about it. And we before we go off today. So I want to take this on a deeper level a little bit here, Jacob, and let's talk about the collective evolution that's going on right now, right? Have you gotten any messages about the future of humanity or our soul contracts or anything particular about this moment in time with humanity and Earth right now?
It's certainly something that's been brewing for a long time. I think right now is an opportunity to really lean into the me versus the we. I think that's just been the big theme.
Mm.
And people being good historians collectively, I think is very important. As a therapist, for clients to really change, we have to know our own personal history. And, as a collective, for us to change, we have to know of our own history. And you still see, similar patterns, occurring thousands of years that don't work. And my hope is people will get to a point in just being aware that this is not going to work. It's insanity to keep on doing these same things and expecting a shift. So I think more and more people are recognizing patterns that aren't not working and being empowered to lean into different pathways. And I think people are able to really find more symmetry in other people, a lot more. There's still the divide, but that is the roles of duality. With unification, there comes also a test of divisiveness. And so I think that's where people have to really decide as to what they want to lean into, what will govern their lives. So I certainly believe it's in our hands. Nothing is, given, but we have a big task at hand to really lean into unity
Mhm.
in one consciousness and lean into what the other side is and bring that down to here, or be very feral with each other and just lean into patterns that just lead to demise and destructions. I think those are two big avenues that have always plagued us, but now they're a lot more amplified, it seems, during this current time.
Yeah. Well, and we always heard the saying, it's always darkest before dawn. And I
Hmm.
believe that's really the collective that we're seeing right now is that we things seem to be quickening. We see a lot more what seems like nature and fires and war and all these things, but actually what it is just a opening of the veil so that we can see it because it has to get really gritty and like
Hmm.
really nasty and we got to see a lot and view that because right before the dawn before we move into that next experience when that light comes and the persistence that allows us to step through that because I
Hmm.
say before every breakthrough there is a breakdown. You have to break down old beliefs, ideas, and habits to break through to a new existence. And so right now we're in that breakdown, we're in that midst of
Hmm.
all of this shakeup and the darkest before the dawn. And yet, if we just hold as a collective and love each other into this unity consciousness, be in that space and knowing that we are instead of just saying we are one and not really knowing what that means, but embodying that on
Hmm.
a core level, then we get to move through this as a collective. That's how I feel,
I love it.
and
Yeah.
that
There's a lot of muck coming to the surface, but
yeah.
the way out is through. And just as
Mhm.
the planet needs the sun to have continuity, we all have that light of the sun in ourselves. And if we're able, like we said, to think globally by acting locally, and each person seeing darkness in front of them, as MLK said, darkness cannot drive out darkness, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love, only light can change that. And if each person takes that individualized responsibility, what a different world we'd have. What a different world. And that allows us to not only survive, but to thrive. And it really is really why we're here, to be our brothers and sisters keeper. And so I hope what I saw on the other side isn't just reserved over there, but something that is right here. And that's how those veils are a lot thinner when the dichotomy isn't as strong,
Yeah.
and isn't as vast, if that makes sense. But I love that analogy where, yeah, to break through, sometimes we have to face things and allow those things to rise and engage, with love, with light to shift, the energy.
Yeah. So we have a question from Ryan, and Ryan
Sure.
asks, do you feel there are counter forces or power trying to keep us from this growth or transformation, or is it just us getting in our own way and we have to worry about most?
I think there's certainly a lot of factors at hand, but I always take an empowered standpoint where, you know, and I believe in principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, that to really understand factors at hand that you can't control difference between the two. The only thing that we have a competency of control is ourselves, and the better we are, as I say, high tides are going to be rising all boats. So I think certainly there's a lot of possibilities at hand. They may be
Mm,
valid or disvalid. I don't lean my energy into that. I just say, all right, what is adaptive? What is productive? You could have a lot of things at a reality basis, but are they and are justifiable, but are they adaptable? And when I think of continuity and I think of survival, I think of thriving, I think of the one skill that's needed is adaptability. That's the greatest thing at hand. And I think for each person, we have to say, like, what is adaptive, what's productive, not what is valid, what is what I think, but what is going to get me through this in the best possible way.
Beautiful. Love that. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left, and I have a couple of closing reflection questions that I would love to just
Mhm.
hear your answers for. The first one is, what does heaven on earth mean to you in this very moment?
Love, feeling
Mm,
the love inside of me, around me, and love is eternal. It has infinite layers, but a deepening of the love and a deepening of the connectivity that each person has beyond themselves to their surroundings, an
mm.
unconditional love towards themselves and their fellow inhabitants. It's the embodiment of love. That to me is heaven on earth.
Yeah, the embodiment. I think that there's a real movement towards embodiment now because we look at that as above, so below, right? The Hermetic principles that say this, and so many people have been reaching for spirituality and this thing out there, and it's very like has been very ungrounded and woo woo and things. And we have to remember, bring that in, embody it, hold that in our system.
Right?
Because it's the actual earth body and the vessel that we came here to experience this through, heaven through us.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff, and I'm not a chef or stuff like that. It's like cooking like this 10-pound bag of spinach and getting like one little thing back. When you have such an overload of information and intellectualization, it could be overwhelming. And I think it's in simplicity. I think, and to me,
Mm.
simplicity goes beyond intellectualization. I think that's the first step, but the second step is to feel it, to really know it, to experience it. That's where the real results will happen, not just about the regurgitation of information. That's school. That's not, that's not the soul. The soul needs to feel and directly experience on a deep, authentic level, not just hear it or. So yes, absolutely.
If you could go back and whisper one message to your 3-year-old self before that NDE, what would it be?
It's all going to work out.
Awesome.
It's all going to work out.
Yeah.
It will be all right.
Awesome. And then our last question for today, unless the audience has anything else, is what legacy do you most hope to leave behind? What has your soul came here to serve?
Mhm.
Mm.
Well, I'd be upset if people said Jacob Cooper NDE. And I say that because I am grateful for my near-death experience and I don't take it for granted for a minute, but I want people to remember what I experienced in themselves. I don't want people to see what I had as something separate from what they
Mhm.
don't have. And I'd like people to really just, through my journey and experience, to remember who they really are. So I don't want people to remember me. I want people to remember themselves and where they come from. And hope and perhaps this was a part of their journey, but I don't have attachment to that. It's more about people remembering who they are rather than remembering me.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you so much, Jacob, for your wisdom and your magic today.
Hmm.
And thank
Yeah,
you, everyone, for joining us for a course in The Other Side and Back with Jacob Cooper. It is now available on the Stream Plus platform. Join Stream Plus now and gain immediate access to this incredible program. You'll get access to Jacob's course and our other incredible spiritual teachers and programs. We're proud to say that Humanity Stream Plus is the largest global streaming platform for conscious raising masterclasses and transformational education. We are a nonprofit and also give back with our one for one program, sharing our content with those who cannot afford the membership. I want to thank Steve Farrell, Dee Meyer, and the production team, Jim Gray, Garth Catterall, Nanette Kennedy, Martha Lurr, Karen Weissert, and the rest of the humanities team. And especially today, thank you, Jacob.
thank you. My love is sent to everyone listening and watching, and thank you for all the beautiful work that is done in Humanity's team. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. We'll see you again soon.